And Jefferson and all these people died for you people? You think that we went 250 years and we fought everywhere from Iwo Jima all the way to Belleau Wood to Gettysburg so that you people could just walk in, many of them from first or second generation immigration, lecturing us? Oh, I think your system is no good, and I decided that when we take power, we're going to get rid of the Constitution, and the founders are all racist, and and we're just going to say, okay, we got your. No, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
This is a party that's satanic.
It is,
Victor. When you think about the homeless, this is a huge mental health crisis that the Democrats, and I would say the Democrat Socialists, would prefer these people to live this excruciating, crazed life. They're happy to have fentanyl come over the border and have hundreds of thousands of people kill themselves every year. And then you think about these children who were just sent over the border and now in sex trade or coyotes, who God knows what's happened to so many of these kids. This is truly, Marquis de Sade, I don't think would have been pushing this.
Yeah, and Tim Walz is worried more about a child molester can stay here. Think about a guy who molested his own niece, and then he says, I don't want to deport him even though he's a convicted child molester and he's an illegal alien.
The list goes
because
on.
what would his children be like? You would like a convicted child molester to be in the same house, given his record earlier that he molested a young girl with his own children. Are you insane? And I think it's like, if you were to draw a cartoon, it's the traditional normal American with his hands over his ears, and he's in a circle, a firing squad, and everything is firing him on at once. The trans thing, the open borders thing, the immigration thing, the open borders thing, the DEI thing, all of this. And it's just reaching, and the less power they have, the more strident and screeching they become. And they're getting fanatical. And I don't think they understand what people think of them. So, and they another thing that people are getting really tired of are these people with exquisite taste that are lecturing us on capitalism. So spoke Gavin Newsom, who lives in a $999 million home, and he does that little hand thing like this. We know this capitalism doesn't work. It worked for you. Crony capitalism worked for you, Gavin. And then you have Ilhan Omar. They have been listing some of her expenses. She's very, very wealthy. She's got refined taste. So does AOC with her designer dresses. So does Zoran Madami. He's from one of the richest families. So is Graham Plattner. He likes capitalism because his daddy and his mother set him up in business through capitalist means. And then they
see that
go ahead. It's just
Presley, the bald congresswoman from Massachusetts, her husband. He spent 10 years in prison for drug trafficking. He just got a $2 billion contract, no bid contract from the state for I forget what the hell they're going to build in Springfield. But yeah, they have DACAs. Bernie's got his 3 houses. They live large.
They should study the Russian Revolution and how the apparat and the nomenclatura lived. They all had DACAs on the Black Sea. White people were starving, and they were shooting people. And then the authenticity. I had an article I just finished. It's coming out Tuesday on. We've talked about the left-wing search for the authentic white male voter candidate. Yeah. And I talked about authenticity and accents. I'm going to have to add some to the final version of it because did you see AOC faking her accent in front of a black audience?
No.
Yeah. Well, she didn't say, I'm so tired, we's going to get there, like Hillary or Barack Obama when he goes, just want to say, we ain't gonna, that kind of stuff. But she tried the same thing in the black audience. And my question is, why do all these left-wing candidates, whenever they get in a tribal situation, they all modulate their dress, their attitude, and their voice? And I don't understand it. I have a really good friend who happens to be Mexican American. He's a brilliant electrician, and he comes by to fix stuff. I won't tell you his name. I'll just call him Jesus. If Jesus comes over Friday as he's scheduled, and I start explaining a problem, what would he think if I said this? Hey, I want you to know Jesus. Hey, man, I got some wires. Can you get them already? Okay, already. Well, that would be insulting. Yeah, that would be racist. Why would, and I would try to do it like I'm hip. Why do they think that talking to these groups with fake accents?
And you've seen this in situations, and you almost you look at each other like, oh man, you want to tell them?
It's going to appeal and make you
try.
feel
I know, and then they get upset with you for not telling them, and you try to explain to them.
An upper middle class spoiled brat, Vince from the suburbs of Connecticut, Jack. I'm not talking about your suburb.
That's not even funny.
Who went to?
No, it's sad, especially when you see others who encourage it, egg them on.
The nations on a map of the Middle East.
Yeah,
and
really sad.
Very upscale.
It fluctuates, yeah.
And
Seems to fluctuate with the tourist season, you know,
black people by fake
which seems to be
They're gonna put you
way
all
more
over
often than it used to be. It's like tourist season every day
I
now.
said the person that said
Tourist season in January, February, and March. Oh,
just for the record, I want to
no!
there is a close. She's from the Bronx originally, but
It's
she
too
went to
late.
her suburban life was in Westchester. So not that
I'm gonna take a
Connecticut
shower.
is
What are you doing?
in its sorry way. It's okay. How far is it from you, Westchester? We're up. Oh, right now? Yeah. About 50, 60 miles. That's a long way. Yeah, from when I grew up, I lived within a mile of the border. So
I'm trying to laugh with you.
Victor, let's take a little
But when
break.
you don't laugh, it makes it really hard. I can't force you to
speech on left-wing violence, and then we'll get into Dami and his desire to have
Right, it's mean when you understand it. If you know someone can't whistle, and they just never learn to whistle, they can't. You see them trying, you know, they're never gonna. You know,
250 years ago, many things have changed. But some
I feel like I'm trying to whistle with you.
the commitment of husband and wife.
I'm trying to do layups with you. I'm trying to do the high jump with you, but you know, when you know someone just can't do it, it's just that'd be mean and patronizing, right?
First things first, you've only just begun.
Share eclectically, ecclesiastically, I can't remember the word. Like living through.
It's like people are going a little extra. Actually, I think the general critique of it has been authentic, has been sincere. It kind of stands out a little when he's often now portrayed against J.D. Vance, so it seems comparative almost with some of the criticism of Vance. But regardless of that, what did you think of his talk about left-wing violence?
Well, I think he's just being empirical. I think what he was saying, and I read the speech, and I heard it, he's saying that all the rhetoric is warning about white supremacists. Is that true or not? Let's examine that empirically without How about, I guess his name was Cole Allen at the White House dinner? He thought he was left-wing at least much of the time that he did. How about the killer of Brian Thompson? These are all political assassins. Oh yeah, Luigi Mangione, he's a hero to the left. And who seems to be lamenting when Donald Trump escapes yet another assassination? Oh, it's people on the left. And do we see Proud Boys on the street trying to firebomb ICE people? No. We see groups that are either organized or have some affiliation with big donors that supply them, or with often Antifa shows up. And how about on campuses when they're waving Hezbollah and Hamas flags and they're trashing the campus and they go out in the streets and hit people? Oh, I think that's the left. So he's right. Everybody, the left tries to project. They say, oh, there's all these right-wing hate groups, and then therefore we're not going to say a word about our hate groups. And he's warning Europe because they have even more incidents of it. But again, everybody should realize that the way the left works is, if you profess at the beginning that you're interested in equality and not liberty or personal freedom, then you get a pass because you're empathetic and you're wonderful, you're moral, because you care about equality and making everybody the same. So you have to use violence to achieve it. That's different. But the other people, they're just racist when they use violence. So there you go.
Permits anything and everything, as opposed to opportunity. If you stand by equality, then anything you do to achieve the equality is good. The ends justify the means, right?
We were driving about 500 miles round trip in California, so nobody needs to know what that means on our decrepit highways. And we were watching semi-trucks, huge semi-trucks, in the left lane at times when there were 3 lanes, and a lot when there was 2 lanes, and weaving in and out, and going from one side to the other. Their second trailer often looked like a goldfish tail, back and forth. And then when you drive by them, we had an SUV, so it was kind of higher on the passenger side. They all have now a curtain down, you know what I mean? A curtain, so you can't look in very well. But if you turn around, you can see that they are non-native born, and I won't try to specify which particular ethnic group, but it's a particular ethnic group. And my point is, when you're talking about violence and endangering the public, and you make this mythical white person going around doing everything, and you let in 10 million people south of the border, or you gave 40,000 bogus truck driving, professional driver's license to people who are here illegally, what do you expect to happen? And we had the Sikh driver that killed, 3 people? He was only sentenced to 5 years. He was just sentenced.
Yeah, I think that was the second, like, plowing into people.
Yes, he plowed right in and killed it just right. Yeah.
Yeah, he got 5 years. The guys that did the fishtail, tried to take the other highway, I think they killed 3 people.
They killed 3 people, yeah, that's right.
While you were ill, Victor, recovering, I should say, I want to remind our viewers they should check out some of the archives of the podcast, because I had on pinch hitting for you Gordon McGill, who wrote a book, End of the Road Inside the War on Truckers. It's terrific on a host of issues with trucking, but including on all this legal matters. Victor, let's conclude here with your take on Zoran Mamdani against Benjamin Netanyahu. This is just a beginning of the New York Post article. Mayor Zoran Mamdani says he's desperately seeking a legal loophole to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged force crimes when he visits New York City in September. And that's when the UN General Assembly takes place, and many of the leaders of presidents, etc., around the world come to New York. The pro-Palestine, Israel-hating socialist Powell said in an interview published Saturday that it's unclear whether he has the authority to order the NYPD to arrest Netanyahu during the Prime Minister's expected trip to the Big Apple for the UN General Assembly, but it is a quote, an active conversation in quote with the city's law department about the matter. Quote, I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu belongs in The Hague, Mondami bluntly told the New York Times, referring to the United Nations International Court of Justice.
He is first of all, he's ignorant. Second of all, he's a racist anti-Semite. And third, he's a liar. That's pretty tough. When I say racist anti-Semite, I'll ask him this. So the UN is where heads of state come for sessions. And you're alleging that because he replied to the biggest slaughter in Jewish history of Israel, and in Gaza, because they would not hand over the perpetrators, and they took over 250 hostages, and they butchered 1,200 and wounded 5,000. You're saying that he is a war criminal, but you're not saying that Khamenei was aware, the son of his dead father. Did he or any member of the Iranian government, did you arrest him? They just killed 52,000 people, from 40,000 to believe other people. Why wouldn't you say, if any of the Iranian government come to a UN session here in New York, I will arrest him for killing 52,000 people? Or let's just say, we'll just say, how about the head of Russia, Putin, comes? Oh, there's been 350,000 Ukrainians that were killed, and we know they've killed Ukrainian presidents. You're going to arrest him? How about Xi? He's got 1 million fellow Muslims, mayor. He's got 1 million of them in work, labor, concentration camps. But no, you only single out this one particular country. So you are a racist and anti-Semite. Your selectivity is the people. Two, you're ignorant. You're an idiot. Do you understand that people who come from the head of state to the UN have diplomatic immunity? Number one. Number two, do you understand that you're just a local official? You're not even a statewide official. And more importantly, do you understand the 10th Amendment? Do you understand that you're given rights from the federal government if it's not designated, but the federal government is what has the executive power to enforce the law. That's a federal law, that when somebody comes into the UN and we extend diplomatic immunity, that's not a state matter, that's not a local matter, that is a federal law. But my other point is, why don't you do it and see what happens? Why don't you order the NYPD to go arrest Benjamin Netanyahu's motorcade? Walk around, put machine guns around it and see what happens. See if A, they will obey what they order, and B, whether Donald Trump will order the National Guard to arrest you for violating federal law. So you're not going to do it. And third, do you really believe that the International Criminal Court pickpocketing the justices, that are all basically all of them are pro-Palestinian, has any sanctity, credibility? We don't obey international law. You may, but we don't. We, the citizens of America. So and what are you going to, what would be the charge? He's a settler colonialist like you are? That your family is 1% of the Ugandan population, you have 60% of the GDP, and you're not an indigenous person, and your family's only been there 1 or 2 generations, and the community's only been there 3 or 4, and there's no history of any tie of Indians to an African country like Uganda, as Israel is. And so you're going to spout all of these invectives against Jews and Israel and say they're separate colonialists when you came from, not according to us. I have never heard any of us say you were separate colonialists, except to point out what a hypocrite you are when you launch that invective against people that better apply to the United States. So I would like you to see that. an importation from Europe of European socialism, and it did not have a dynamic economy. It had a Western economy, so it was far ahead of its neighbors that did not have oil, but it was not far ahead like the United States is far ahead of Europe. And what he did is he opened up the economy to trade, he deregulated it, he rebooted the tax code, and the result was that they didn't have all these brilliant Jewish entrepreneurs coming to the United States. They stayed in Israel, and it's booming now, booming. And he did that. And then, whatever you want to say, Israel has survived at a time when it was the most, over his long 12-year career, whatever you want to say, this was the period of bin Laden, this was the period of ISIS, this was the period of Hamas, Hezbollah, the circle of fire around Israel, and all of that took place October 7th, and now let's take a deep breath and say, where is Israel right now? Okay, let's look at it. He has told the Houthis if they attack Israel, he's going to do what? Hit their ports, hit their power plant, and they're not going to do it. If they do it, he will come down. I don't think any other country would have done. And then he said to Hamas, you're going to be annihilated. And we're going to try to text people when you hide behind the skirts of women in apartment buildings. We're not going to try to hit mosques and schools and hospitals that you hide your entry and exits on. But we're going to go down in the tunnels if we have to, and we're going to wipe out your whole command. And he did that. And then he said to Hezbollah, we know you have 160,000, you're part of the Ring of Fire, 160,000 missiles, but we're going to take out your top 10,000 people. They did it with the electronic devices, the pagers, they did it with the cell phone, and they've done it with strikes. And when people say, well, he hit all these civilian targets, he's just tearing up. Every one of those quote-unquote civilian targets has Hezbollah operatives in it or missiles somewhere stored here. All they have to do is put a little white flag and have the Lebanese government come in and say, we can sanction this house, it has nothing to do with a terrorist organization. And put a little sanction, and the Israelis will not bomb it. I guarantee you that. So where Israel is today versus where it was, say, 20 years ago and where it was headed, it's a big difference.
Thanks for that. Well, thanks for everything you've shared today, and I want to thank the folks who take the time to write comments on YouTube and various other platforms. And here are two comments. One is from Covert User, who writes, and we talked the other day about the map of New York, Montami, with Little Italy and Little Ireland not being there, no Little Israel, not that there wasn't a neighborhood by that name, but anyway, he writes, I understand the concern about the current New York City mayor and his administration, but I think that this issue is overblown, as the groups in New York have moved to different neighborhoods over time and eventually out of the city. For example, I have Bohemian ancestors who came to the United States in the early 1860s who lived on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Apparently was an ethnic enclave of Slavic people. By the 1880s, they had moved to Long Island City, Queens, and I have additional Bohemian ancestors who arrived then and also went to Long Island City. I also have Sicilian ancestors who arrived in 1901, who went to live on the Lower East Side in Little Italy. The New York City neighborhoods that I lived in as a young child is today unrecognizable. I wonder how many Italians still live in Italy, Little Italy, hardly anybody. Do they believe that they own it forever and once a year go there, hold parades? Question mark. I just would like to say to Covert User, but Victor, to our listeners, these neighborhoods were essentially neighborhoods of, yes, the Irish and the Italian might not have got along, and et cetera, et cetera. We were all people that shared Western civilization.
Well, I don't think with all due respect to the letter writer, these are honorific groupings. They're not trying to suggest that there's this huge unassimilated people off the boats in perpetuity. What they're trying to say is this was an area where very, very, very poor people Eastern Europe, they came and they got to New York and they had nothing. And they built their families and they were prosperous and they helped the city expand and be enriched. And then when they were firmly in the middle and upper middle class and sometimes wealthy, their children maybe have moved on. But we honor them, just like we say, we have terms that say Germantown or Chinatown. You go to many Chinatowns, there's not very many Chinese anymore. You go to many Germantowns and there's none. And so it's kind of, the United States uses names from Italy, they use names from Britain. Georgetown doesn't have any followers of King George anymore. But we don't change the name of it just because it represents so-called white people in Britain. And that's what he's doing. He's taking these very cherished, honorific names and he's deliberately in Orwellian fashion erasing them from the collective memory and then inserting little places like he had about 20 of them. It wasn't just
Little Senegal.
Little Senegal. He was just putting all of these in and they had one common denominator, most of them. They were non-white, they were non-European, and they were seen by Mondami as center, left, revolutionary, whatever you're against the grain. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing when he said he was going to go after richer and whiter neighborhoods. He's a racist, and he tries to divide people, and then he gives you that sappy little socialist smile and that big white teeth, and he's so kind and lovable and fuzzy, you just want to squeeze him. But he is a hardcore Trotskyite Marxist. And don't be fooled by it. And he doesn't want it. He can't, he cannot, he tries to separate people by class, and he talks about doing it, but it doesn't resonate because he is, to use his own terminology, a settler colonialist family who's fabulously well off, prestigious, heavily subsidized by the U.S. government, and very ungrateful innocents who have said, filmed, and written about the posts that they choose to join. But that doesn't work very well for him. It doesn't work very well for Platinum. It doesn't work very well for any of these sources. They're all either frustrated middle activists or some very wealthy. But what does work for them is race. That's how they try to divide people. And that's behind all of what he does. Race. He's trying to make a 30, 70, and he thinks in New York that he's going to create the first 70% non-white city that is a mosaic of all the different people who don't like America and have been victimized by white America and have grievances, and they need repertory action under his godhead while he goes and lives in his mansion or he goes and flies to Lake Victoria to get married in his lakeside abode, which by the way was heavily fortified and secured.
As a follow-up to that, I learned today, I did not know this, I did a link to this article from Front Porch Republican. It's going to be in the next edition of Civil Thoughts. This is not an segue to Civil Thoughts, but if you'd like to get Civil Thoughts, it's the free weekly email newsletter I write comes out every Friday at 14 p.m. Just go to civilthoughts.com. There was an article about New Sweden. I did not know there was a Swedish attempt at a colony or project in the Delaware and Pennsylvania area. And talk about names. There was Christina, Delaware. There's names between Christina and Sweden, but there's no Swedes anymore in that area. But I had never known that was an attempted project.
I guess I live 3 miles from Kingsborough, the town of the king, and I think that's an honorific to represent the 3 crowns of Sweden. And I think the number of people inside Kingsborough today who speak Swedish is less than 1%, but I do know that nobody's going to change the name of Kingsborough and take it off the map and say, try to rename it because of the dominant population is not Swedish anymore. If it is, I don't know. But if you go down Kingsborough Street, you see very wonderful woman, and she came to my family, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and said, your family had this farm right in the center of Kingsburg, and it became the Kingsburg City Park. And for an immigrant, no immigrant family had suffered as much. The son of the immigrant, who was born on his way to America, my grandfather, was gassed and disabled after use argon. His nephew that he helped raise when his mother died in childbirth was killed in the 6th Division in Okinawa. His son, my father, flew on 40 missions over Japan and Korea, and was two emergency crashes in Iwo Jima to save the crew. And I think was credited with three down Japanese fighters that almost hit the plane. And the other nephew was in a very dangerous job of transporting American aid via Iran to Russian forces by truck. And so she wanted to honor that family. And she said, and she went to the city council, as I remember, and she called me from the meeting and said that there was an ethnic group that said we object because these people are white and all this stuff. And she tried to make the art, and then she said, we have people who died in Vietnam and all this. And she said it wasn't just because this family had this war record, but because this is their land. This is their land. If you can find a place in Kingsburg where your ancestors gave it, or it was transferred to the city, and now it's a memorial park, then we'll be happy to do that. And but the point that she was making to me is that she thought that this was a Swedish city that was founded by Swedes, and it was still predominantly Swedish American. And this Swedish American family had been one of the original founders from Lund, Sweden, Nels Hansen. And his farm became the city park, and his son and grandsons and grandnephews, all the grandsons had been fighting for the United States as second generation people. And she wanted to honor that trifecta. Swedish town honoring the original Swedish family whose land became the iconic park of the old town, and whose family had bred and been disabled fallen from the States, and then another ethnic group said, well, why not us? So that was, there was nothing, by the way, there was nothing about ethnicity that was mentioned. It was just about Sweden and trying to reify the Swedish theme that the city council had already established, that we want to, for purposes of tourism, emphasize that we were founded by Swedes.
Well, but I just played, very sent out that song. All right, one last comment picture from JFK, AJEH 4043. I don't know what it stands for. You were talking about speech impediments. Recent episode where he writes, I love you, Jack. Haha. Hey, Victor, I was in speech therapy for 5 years in elementary school also. I have a little list for phrases solved that the orthodontist said, get this girl out of speech therapy. It's still there a little bit. My husband calls it a peach impediment. You are both terrific. Well, thank you for that.
Yes.
I bring that up because
there's a bill now under consideration in California to enter, if they don't call it Ebonics anymore, it's Black English, I think. I think we discussed it.
we discussed it, yeah.
And it's funny because as a so-called white person, when I was in school, we all had to go in and read, no matter who you were. There was about 10%, 5% of the school was white, and the rest was 95% Hispanic. But everybody had to go read, and then she would try to evaluate who had to take an hour a week with the Bear. That was when we all watched those cartoons. That bad rabbit. And people would come up to me and say, hey Victor, are you a rabbit? Say rabbit. Say rabbit. And she would, I tried to say rabbit. She said, you're saying rabbit. No, it's rabbit. Rabbit. And even today I have a speech impediment. So I think she was wonderful, but the point I'm making is she was trying to get a universal language where everybody would have the same accent and would have the same grammar and syntax. Not because she was a Eurocentric and sensitive to particular cultures, but because she wanted people to be successful.
I want to be successful. I'm going to immigrate to America and I'm going to study to become successful.
I would ask the sponsors of that California bill, if it's even in the legislature yet, that you want to stress black English. If you are a black ad executive, and there are many, and you're making a commercial to appeal to not only black people but to white people, let's say a George Foreman like grill, are you going to use black English? Now, maybe a little bit to show authenticity, but are you going to try to say, you better ain't going to do this that I be doing? No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to caricature black language of the inner city. You're just not going to do it. And anybody that would want you to do that doesn't want you to succeed. So why are they doing it? They're doing it because they don't have any answers to broken families when people are being brought up with a patois that's not good English, and the unionized schools don't make any effort, and they're terrified of the students.
Well, yeah, it isn't getting southern slang. People even say they have a Boston
And
accent.
that would hurt the students.
There's a
that
Brooklyn
they
accent.
industry.
Talks like a man.
No jive there. Okay. You've been terrific. Thanks for all the wisdom, sharing, the analysis. Thanks folks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Victor Davis Hanson in his own words. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Signal. Please like, share, and subscribe to be notified for more content.
Right, so it's like more like a
VictorHanson.com.
impediment or a list.
Step up to the plate this summer with your urban.
Following the collapse of Graham Plattner, candidate empty affirmations or unrealistic promises, but with awareness, discipline, and truth. A Shaolin practitioner understands that every transformation begins long before the body moves. It begins in the mind. Every word you repeat becomes a seed. Every thought you entertain becomes a habit. Every habit eventually becomes your character. If you wish to become stronger, calmer, and more resilient, then you must first become the kind of person whose inner voice creates strength instead of fear. For the next few moments, allow yourself to observe your own mind without judgment. Listen carefully to the words you have been repeating every day. Then discover how changing that conversation for only 3 days can begin a transformation that lasts a lifetime. The first discipline is to become aware of the language you use when speaking to yourself. Most people never notice this conversation because it has become automatic. It runs quietly in the background like a program that has been operating for years. Every mistake is followed by criticism. Every challenge is met with doubt. Every setback becomes proof that they are not capable enough. They believe these thoughts are simply facts, when in reality they are habits. Habits can be changed, but only when they are first observed. Imagine someone following you every moment of your life, repeating every sentence you say to yourself. Would you feel encouraged by that person, or would you slowly lose confidence because of their constant criticism? Surprisingly, many people treat themselves in ways they would never treat another human being. They forgive strangers more quickly than they forgive themselves. They offer compassion to others while denying it to their own minds. This does not mean you should lie to yourself. It does not mean pretending every decision is perfect or every failure is a success. Real strength is built on honesty, not illusion. Honest self-respect means looking directly at your weaknesses without allowing them to define your identity. You can acknowledge a mistake without becoming the mistake. You can recognize an area that needs improvement without believing you are unworthy. For 3 days, practice changing one simple habit. Every time your mind says, "I cannot do this," pause immediately. Replace it with a statement that is both truthful and empowering. Say, "I am learning." Instead of saying, "I always fail," remind yourself, "I have failed before and I have also learned before." These are not motivational slogans. They are balanced observations. They keep your mind connected to reality instead of fear. Your brain listens carefully to repetition. Whatever you repeat becomes familiar. Whatever becomes familiar begins to feel true. This is why negative self-talk is so dangerous. It slowly reshapes your identity. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are weak, eventually you stop questioning that belief. Your actions begin to reflect it. Opportunities are avoided. Risks are ignored. Growth becomes uncomfortable because your identity has already accepted limitation. Now imagine reversing that process. For 3 days, every morning before checking your phone, before speaking to anyone else, sit quietly for a few moments. Take a slow breath and say, "Today I choose patience over panic. I choose awareness over reaction. I choose progress over perfection." These words are not magic. Their power comes from directing your attention toward the qualities you wish to strengthen. Throughout the day, your mind will naturally return to old habits. This is expected. Years of conditioning cannot disappear in an instant. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Each time you notice yourself speaking harshly inside your mind, gently interrupt the pattern. Do not criticize yourself for having negative thoughts. Simply replace them with a healthier direction. Think of a gardener removing weeds. The gardener does not become angry every time another weed appears. Instead, the gardener patiently removes it and continues caring for the soil. Your mind is no different. Negative thoughts are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are simply reminders that your mental garden requires consistent attention. Many people wait until they feel confident before they begin changing their lives. Yet confidence is rarely the starting point. Confidence is often the result of repeatedly keeping small promises to yourself. Every time you speak with kindness instead of cruelty, you strengthen trust within yourself. Every time you refuse to believe your worst thoughts, you weaken their influence. Every time you respond with patience instead of judgment, you create emotional stability. Observe how your body reacts to different words. When you silently repeat, "I am hopeless," your shoulders become heavier, your breathing becomes shallow, your energy decreases. But when you calmly say, "This is difficult, but I can continue," your posture changes, your breath becomes steadier, your nervous system begins responding differently because your internal environment has changed. The greatest warriors are not those who never experience fear. They are those who refuse to let fear become the narrator of their lives. Likewise, the strongest minds are not free from negative thoughts. They simply refuse to obey every thought that appears. They understand that awareness creates freedom. A thought may enter the mind, but it does not deserve permanent residence. During these 3 days, notice how often you seek validation from others. Ask yourself whether you are speaking to yourself with the same respect you hope to receive from the world. If your inner voice is constantly hostile, external praise will never feel enough. But when your relationship with yourself becomes peaceful, approval from others becomes less necessary because your worth is no longer borrowed from outside opinions. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice this discipline. Waiting in traffic becomes a chance to choose patience instead of frustration. Making a mistake becomes a chance to choose learning instead of shame. Facing uncertainty becomes a chance to choose courage instead of imagination-driven fear. Ordinary moments become training sessions for extraordinary inner strength. The purpose of changing your self-talk is not to become someone different overnight. The purpose is to stop standing in the way of the person you are already capable of becoming. Every compassionate sentence weakens old conditioning. Every honest word of encouragement builds resilience. Every conscious thought creates a new direction for your mind. Little by little, the voice that once limited you begins to guide you with wisdom, patience, and unwavering self-respect. If someone you truly loved kept you feeling broken, discouraged, or afraid, would your first response be to criticize them? Would you remind them of every mistake they have ever made? Would you tell them they are incapable, weak, or destined to fail? Of course not. You would speak with patience. You would encourage them without denying reality. You would remind them of their strength, their potential, and their ability to rise again. Yet many people reserve this kindness for everyone except themselves. The relationship you have with yourself is the longest relationship you will ever experience. Every day, your mind is listening to the words you repeat. If those words are filled with judgment, shame, and constant criticism, your spirit becomes exhausted before the day has even begun. But when you begin speaking to yourself with the same wisdom, honesty, and compassion you would offer someone you deeply care about, your inner world slowly becomes a place of strength instead of conflict. Speaking kindly to yourself does not mean making excuses or avoiding responsibility. It means becoming a wise teacher rather than a harsh judge. A good teacher corrects mistakes without destroying confidence. They point out what needs improvement while reminding the student that growth is possible. They understand that fear may force temporary obedience, but encouragement builds lasting discipline. Imagine a child learning to walk. Every time they fall, they stand up again because the people around them encourage them. No loving parent expects perfection on the first attempt. They understand that falling is part of learning. place right now, what would I say to them? Then offer those same words to yourself. You may discover that the guidance you naturally give others is exactly what your own heart has been waiting to hear. When you miss a goal, do not say, I am a failure. Instead, remind yourself, this attempt did not succeed, but I can learn from it. When fear tells you not to begin, answer with calm confidence. You do not have to be perfect to take the first step. When your mind compares your journey to someone else's, gently redirect your attention by saying, their path is not my path. My responsibility is to become better than I was yesterday. This shift may seem small, but it changes everything. Your mind begins to associate challenges with growth rather than danger. Your nervous system becomes calmer because it no longer expects punishment every time you make a mistake. You stop wasting energy fighting yourself and begin using that energy to improve yourself. Many people believe that being hard on themselves creates success. They think constant self-criticism will make them stronger. In reality, endless criticism often creates hesitation, anxiety, and self-doubt. A person who is constantly attacked by their own thoughts becomes afraid to take risks because every mistake feels like proof of their unworthiness. When a person treats themselves with respectful honesty, develops resilience. They understand that failure is information, not identity. Think about the people who have positively influenced your life. Chances are, they did not inspire you by humiliating you. They inspired you because they believed in your ability to grow. They challenged you while also reminding you of your potential. Become that voice for yourself. Let your inner dialogue become a source of direction instead of destruction. This practice also teaches humility. Speaking kindly to yourself is not about believing you are superior to others. It is about recognizing that every human being is imperfect and learning.
Ladies and wings at a big six for $19.99. Careful, those babies are moving the content. Sure. Hey, right, it's really not that. Oh, too spicy, too spicy. Big six meal for two for $19.99.
Just as you would allow a lump on the space to grow, allow yourself that same space. Growth is not a straight line. There will be days of progress and days of setbacks. Both belong to the journey. Throughout these 3 days, create small moments of intentional self-conversation. In the morning, remind yourself, today I will respond with patience instead of panic. Before beginning a difficult task, say, I may not know everything, but I am capable of learning. At the end of the day, instead of focusing only on what went wrong, ask yourself, what did I do well today? What lesson can I carry into tomorrow? These simple questions train your mind to seek wisdom instead of self-condemnation. Over time, this way of speaking becomes natural. Your inner voice becomes calmer, wiser, and more supportive. You no longer depend entirely on praise from others because you have learned to guide yourself with integrity. You become someone who can face difficulty without collapsing under the weight of your own thoughts. The greatest transformation does not happen when the world finally believes in you. It begins when you become the kind of person who can stand alone in silence and still speak to yourself with respect, patience, truth, and unwavering compassion. Most people believe their greatest enemy is outside of them. Difficult people, painful circumstances, or unexpected failures. But in many cases, the real battle begins much earlier. It begins with a single unchecked thought. One negative idea enters the mind, conscious choice strengthens a new one. Over time, your mind stops automatically following fear and begins naturally returning to clarity. Instead of reacting to every negative thought, you learn to observe it, release it, and redirect your attention toward what is within your control. The strongest mind is not the one that never experiences negativity. It is the one that refuses to let negativity decide its future. By interrupting destructive thought patterns before they take root, you create space for discipline, resilience, and inner peace to grow. Discipline is often misunderstood as forcing yourself to work harder, wake up earlier, or push through discomfort. While these actions are important, they are only the visible expression of something much deeper. True discipline begins long before your body takes action. It begins with the conversation you have with yourself. Every choice you make is influenced by the words you repeat in your mind. If your inner voice constantly negotiates with discomfort, makes excuses, or seeks the easiest path, your actions will follow. But when your self-talk becomes intentional, disciplined action becomes a natural result rather than a constant struggle. Most people wait until they feel motivated before they begin. They tell themselves, I'll start tomorrow, I'm not in the right mood, or I need more confidence first. These thoughts seem harmless, but repeated often enough, they become habits. The mind learns that every difficult task can be delayed. Every challenge becomes optional. Over time, the gap between what you want and what you actually do grows wider. Not because you lack ability, but because your inner dialogue has trained you to seek comfort over growth. A Shaolin monk understands that the mind must be trained with the same consistency as the body. Discipline is not built in dramatic moments. It is built through ordinary decisions repeated every day. The words you speak to yourself each morning become the foundation for those decisions. If you begin the day with complaints, resistance, or self-doubt, you carry that energy into every situation. But if you begin with calm intention, reminding yourself that your responsibility is to act regardless of emotion, you strengthen the part of your mind that values commitment over convenience. For the next 3 days, make your self-talk deliberate. Before you reach for your phone, before the noise of the world enters your mind, spend a few quiet moments speaking with purpose. Tell yourself, today I will do what needs to be done, even if I do not feel like doing it. Remind yourself, discomfort is temporary, but discipline creates freedom. These are not empty affirmations, they are commitments. They prepare your mind to respond with action instead of excuses. Throughout the day, notice the moments when your mind begins bargaining. It may say, skip today's practice, rest a little longer, or one missed opportunity won't matter. Rather than arguing with yourself, listen and return to your instinct. I choose discipline because my future depends on today's actions. Every time you respond this way, you weaken the habit of procrastination and strengthen the habit of consistency. Discipline also means speaking to yourself with honesty. If you fail to keep a promise, do not hide from it, but do not attack yourself either. Simply recognize what happened, learn from it, and begin again immediately. Harsh criticism rarely produces lasting discipline. It usually creates guilt, and guilt often leads to avoidance. Honest accountability, however, builds trust. You begin believing your own words because your actions repeatedly support them. As this practice continues, your inner voice changes. It becomes less emotional and more dependable. Instead of asking, do I feel like it? You begin asking, is this aligned with the person I am becoming? That single shift transforms the way you approach work, relationships, health, and personal growth. You no longer depend on motivation to move forward because your self-talk has become a steady guide, reminding you that discipline is an act of self-respect, practiced one decision at a time. Your greatest ally or your greatest obstacle is is not the people around you. It is the mind you carry with you every moment of every day. No matter where you go, your thoughts follow. If your mind constantly works against you with doubt, fear, and criticism, even the best opportunities will feel overwhelming. But if your mind supports you with clarity, patience, and discipline, even life's greatest challenges become manageable. The goal is not to control every thought. The goal is to create an inner environment where your mind becomes your partner instead of your opponent. Many people live as if they are in a constant argument with themselves. One part of the mind wants growth, while another part insists on staying comfortable. One voice dreams of becoming stronger, while another whispers that it is too late or too difficult. This internal conflict drains more energy than any physical task ever could. Before you can master your circumstances, you must first bring harmony to your own mind. A Shaolin practitioner understands that peace is not found by escaping challenges, but by training the mind to remain steady in the middle of them. Every day presents opportunities to strengthen this relationship. When something unexpected happens, your first thought may be fear. Instead of allowing that fear to take control, pause and breathe. Remind yourself, I do not need to react immediately. I can choose my response. In that small moment of awareness, you reclaim your power. Your mind becomes supportive when you consistently feed it the right habits. Fill it with gratitude instead of constant comparison. Fill it with purpose instead of endless distraction. Fill it with disciplined action instead of empty wishes. Just as the body reflects what it is repeatedly fed, the mind reflects the thoughts, conversations, and habits you consume every day. Protect your attention carefully, because whatever enters your mind repeatedly will eventually shape your character. For the next 3 days, practice becoming your own source of encouragement. Celebrate small victories instead of waiting for perfect results. When you complete a task you have been avoiding, acknowledge it. When you remain calm in a difficult situation, recognize that progress. These moments may seem insignificant, but they teach your mind an important lesson. Growth is happening.
Is it a no?
Confidence is not built by pretending to be perfect. It is built by noticing evidence that you are becoming stronger through consistent effort. It is equally important to let go of unnecessary battles inside your head. You cannot change yesterday, and worrying endlessly about tomorrow steals your ability to act today. Whenever your thoughts drift toward regret or anxiety, gently bring your attention back to the present moment. Ask yourself, what is one useful action I can take right now? This question shifts your focus from helplessness to responsibility, from overthinking to purposeful movement. Remember that your mind is always listening to the story you tell about your life. If you constantly describe yourself as unlucky, weak, or incapable, your actions will begin to match that story. But if you choose a story rooted in resilience, learning, and quiet determination, your behavior gradually aligns with that identity. You stop waiting for confidence to appear because you understand that confidence is